Oh look, there's your chair up there, is it? That's just to
Just
make
a
you
reminder.
feel
Oh, yeah.
important.
My moment of glory, and I've had a chair, I've been kicked out of it into a deck chair now.
Now it
Nice.
looks like you've got a very big bill to pay. Right, what should we order, folks? Kevin's at the top of the table.
Apologies for the delay, but we're having some technical issues. So,
Okay, we are now live, Chair.
right, I think we're now live. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Apologies for it being a few minutes late. But so we've had technical issues, and we've had to relocate to another room. I'm very disappointed. I've lost my nice chair. There we go. We do have some formalities tonight to go through. And the first part is confirmation of chairman and vice chair. And Kimberly will start that process and then hand back to me.
Thank you, Chair.
Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, that was me having my mute, not having the mute on. Thank you, Chair. This has to be done because it's the first meeting after the start of the new council year. We currently have Councillor Kevin Dinas as our chairman. We did unfortunately lose our vice chairman, Councillor Kiki Muralees, who has gone on to the executive. Therefore, Councillor Sally Dixon has been proposed as the vice chairman by group leaders. Therefore, I would like the committee to agree, if possible, that they're happy with the proposed chairmanship of Councillor Dinas and Councillor Dixon.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. It's therefore agreed that the chairman of the Community Wellbeing Over and Scrutiny Committee for the council year 21-22 is Councillor Kevin Dinas, and the vice chair is Councillor Sally Dixon. Thank you very much.
And I believe there's still just some confirmation on the vice chair, but we've gone through this process. So if there's no issues, we haven't got to go through that again at the next meeting. So we just need to remember just to confirm that it's gone through the correct process. Okay, so good to see you. We've got so many people still watching on Zoom, and thank you for everyone who's made it tonight. And I think we've also got Betty listening in, so welcome, Betty. It's always nice to get a member of the public. Okay, so we can turn to the agenda, please. So if we go to item 2, which are the minutes, do we have any amendments or additions to the minutes? No?
Chair, I have an amendment in that the minutes do actually state that the head of housing operations gave some update instead of the head of community. So therefore that has been changed on the minutes now, but it was when it was originally published, it did state the incorrect head of service had reported to us.
Well, we've got an amended, so everyone's happy with the amended, so I've signed those as accurate. Item 3, apologies for absence and substitutions, Kim.
We've had no apologies for absence submitted for this meeting, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And I think people can see we are fairly light because we're waiting for some nominations to be given to us, but it's about quality, not quantity. So, okay, item 4, declarations of interest.
We've had no declarations of interest, Chair.
Brilliant. I think it's going to be a quick meeting. Questions from members of the public?
No, none received, Chair.
Excellent. And questions from members?
None received, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. So now we turn to item number 8, which is the corporate performance report. So that's pages 15 to 18 of your agenda. And the sections for community wellbeing to scrutinise are pages 33 to 43 of the supplementary agenda pack and pages 25 to 35 of the report. So that way we only scrutinise. Now, if people want an updated version, sorry?
That was, I think this is something.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, I was just getting so excited. So Kelvin was just about to jump in with his update, so I'll have to hold his horses. So committee work programme, pages 7 to 14. Okay, so if we go to the first page then, I suppose the only thing for me, just as an update, because it's an item we've had on for a long time, which is on Tracker A, the Farnham Museum, and that's just really to confirm it now goes to the Property Investment Advisory Board, where they'll make their recommendations to the executive, and then potentially after that we will get the actual physical site in and the cultural side come back to this committee. But it's really got to wait for the decision on the building to be made first. Now, is everybody happy? They understand where we are on that? Okay, excellent.
Chairman.
Yes.
So I was using hands. I thought it would be useful just for the committee to note that the MEND programme, the MEND funding grant programme that we were looking for from the Arts Council opened today. We received confirmation that that is now open, and we will be making an application to that MEND fund. It's perfectly suited to the museum. It's for local authorities based in England, and it totals 18.8 million. So that opens today, and we will be making an application.
Okay, Kelvin, have we got any closing dates or any timescales?
Yeah, we must complete our expression of interest before the 5th of July, which is pretty quickly. So we're already out to tender for someone to support us on this piece of work. And then the full online application will open on, if we get through that, on the 2nd of August at 12 p.m. And I think and then we must submit by the 18th of October.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Kelvin.
Thank you.
So just clarify, Kelvin, is it not true that we might not get through the first stage? We have to get through the expression of interest.
That's
If they don't think our application is strong enough, then we might not get to the second stage. And I think the final decision will be made about Christmas. So we'll only know if we get money on then. The thing about this, the knock-on about this is, as a local, sorry, a bit passionate, it does mean that we're going to have scaffolding around that building for yet another year. And we're going to go yet another year without purchasing the bricks at the requisite time, because they have to be ordered in the autumn. So it's just another thing to bear in mind, and whether or not we need to think about the communications again to the city town, and how we explain this. It'll be, I think, the 4th or 5th year of scaffolding around the museum. Okay, sorry. No.
I think that's a good point. I'm sure executive and other parties are aware of this issue. It's unfortunate, but we are where we are. And the decision about the building will have to come from the advisory board. And just hopefully some of the background work that we've done with Kelvin and others to keep this on the agenda and get stuff done might make the decision for them a little bit easier than what it might have been.
I mean, on the plus side, if we don't get through the first round, if we get knocked out, we will know in July, August. So we can look to try and see if we can find money from somewhere else to make a decision on the bricks and everything in October.
Sure that'll be
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, beyond our remit, but I think you made a point. Mark, I think you've got your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to add that my understanding is that the Property Advisory Board had accepted your recommendation from the last meeting to commission some advice on to commission a conditions survey and an options appraisal for the collection, and that both of those are in motion and that advertisements have been placed for the requisite contractors to conduct that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So I think it shows that the hard slog we had on this over a while has actually helped move it along to the next stage. So it is always worth our input on this. So going down the page, we've got the mental health in Waverley.
Could I, Chair?
Yep.
Sorry. The service level agreement task and finish group. I
I think
know,
that's an agenda item, isn't it?
yes, it is, but I'd just like to see something that, you know, it worries me when I see empty spaces, that's all. It's filled in section B as to what's going to happen, what the outcome is, but it's not in section A. That's all I wanted to point out.
Okay. Thank you.
Mental health, that's all.
Mark, I see, sorry, I'm looking at a different screen now. You've got your hand up again. Apologies, I can't really see it.
Sorry, just to confirm that the updated version of the work program that was circulated, I think either today or yesterday, that does reflect that there is the interim report coming to this meeting.
I've got it in mind, so it's one of the other versions. So, so we'll get through that. Okay. Brilliant. So the next one we've got is the mental health in Waverley. Mary, I don't know whether you want, is there anything? Draft suicide prevention plan.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairman. And just to say that I've been in close contact and communication with Louise, and I believe there'll be a report going to the executive possibly in June.
Brilliant. That's all we need.
Today.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's fine. It's just we've got the date in, so thank you for that. Okay, so going into the next page, obviously it talks about service level agreement, but that's on the agenda. Anything from that page, the second page, rather than we go through each and every item. And again, if people on Zoom, if there's an update they want to give that's not in our version, just raise your hand. If not,
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
Are we getting on with a thank you event?
is this from the post-COVID with it
Well, it might.
voluntary and
Yes, it might be. It's Recovery, Change and Transformation Projects, which is on that page you're on, but on the next page it says they plan to hold a thank you event. I just wondered, there's no information about that.
okay, I'll defer to the executive if they.
I'll be honest, that's the first I've heard of that.
It's been.
I know it's been kicked around, but I think the regulations have prevented any
Yes.
organisation on the subject. Yeah.
I think if you just keep it on the radar, it certainly wouldn't be appropriate now. But you wouldn't want to not thank the people as and when you can.
Don't want to lose it, do we?
No.
No, Chairman, if I may add, I think that's a crucial point, is it wouldn't be seen to be right now, but it's seen to be right to have it on the agenda, so
Yeah.
as people know that we do appreciate all the efforts, and that at some point in the future, when the time is right, then somehow we will do something to recognise all those efforts. Just, I was thinking about this, are we going to do two events, like, because there's two sides to this, isn't there? There's the one side to celebrating the people who've done amazing stuff, but then there's almost like a remembrance event for people who passed away, where the families haven't been able to go to hospital, go to funerals and all the rest of it. Are we going to do something?
I don't think that's for us to make that decision. I think what we do is we raise this is a good idea to actually engage in the community and thank them. I think it's probably a Waverley decision rather than a scrutiny.
I think it would be really nice if, like, we did something in the morning, which would be more like a remembrance event, and then in the afternoon had like a carnival or festival or event or something.
Where then?
Well, we could do it on Hale Community.
It's in Farnham.
What we'll do, because
Hale Community Field is open for you.
I don't think we're in a position to make those decisions. But I think, you know, some good points have gone on, and I think Waverley as an organisation can consider that when it's appropriate, when it's right, and to make sure it's pitched at the right level. And we'll leave that with them.
I'm just going to, Chairman, point again, if I might.
Of course you can.
Not to lose it. I don't want it to fall off the radar, and there's no plan. I know we can't do it yet, but I just feel these things take 6 months to plan, so it ought to be somewhere.
Well, it can stay on because it's not a big discussion item, and
so-
it just keeps it on our radar if nothing else. Okay, so going through the list, is there any other points that you want to?
Except from the obvious, that this stops in March 2021. Or does it? Am I missing a page?
Which one are we talking about? Sorry,
Section A, we only go up to March 2021.
that was the last meeting date when we discussed it.
So,
Councillor Fortescue.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just on page 10, regards the Safer Waverley Partnership. I know there was a lot of concern expressed at the time when we discussed that, and I'm pleased to see there's an update in the response. And can anyone feedback on what the protocol being developed, what it entails, and what it actually about, and who's involved?
Andrew, is that's coming from your good self?
I'm sorry, Chairman, I didn't hear Councillor Forojewski's question at all. Could she possibly repeat it? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew, Chairman. There was a lot of discussion around this item. And I know there was a lot of strong feeling around this item when we discussed it before. There's a communication protocol being developed. Is there any update on this development and who's involved and how it's taken shape to address the issues of concern around this item?
We have a meeting of the Safer Waverley Partnership tomorrow. Katie, can you add anything on that? I don't know whether that's on the agenda. I can't remember.
I can't actually remember at the moment. I think sort of certainly through the pandemic, we've been liaising with our comms on the work that we've been sort of doing with the partnership. I think that's something we would now need to sort of go back to business as usual. This is our first executive since we've come out of this lockdown, and very much the items on the agenda about getting back to business as normal. So I'll bring it up. I think we should have it as in any other business tomorrow if it's not on the agenda. And you know, report. I can then do a note back to the committee if you're happy with that.
Thank you. And if you let Mark know so he can update the tracker.
Yeah, will do.
I may have a more recent update. So I spoke to the Borough Commander on Friday about how we make this work going forward. She's going to be organising an event for all of the Borough and County Councillors in Waverley to discuss what's the best way to interact with the police and the general partnership going forward. So that will be coming up fairly soon, running alongside what Andrew and Katie did.
Okay. Okay, so moving to the next page. Any items to raise?
Aging strategy plan.
Yep.
It will be revised at a later date. Do we have a date? Is there a plan to revise the plan?
Fergus and Andrew or Katie?
Yes, we do, and it should be in the service plan, Andrew. So I'd have to pull the dates out. But we're going to sort of looking at trying to sort of do consultation events later in this year. I mean, obviously we've been a little bit difficult with lockdown. We haven't been able to sort of do the consultation that we would like to do. But again, that's certainly on the agenda. But from my understanding, yeah, it's all part of our service plan for this year.
It is. It's in the service plan, and obviously we haven't been able to continue reviewing that in the timescales originally planned because of the pandemic, and seeing how things shook down as we came out of the pandemic and what actually our ageing population need. And that kind of ties in with the discussions we're having with those who run the day centres and those who look after our elderly residents. So it's work in progress at the moment.
Well, hopefully at the next meeting you can probably give us some more time, because I think we do need to build a time in, a realistic time. I'm not expecting ready by the next meeting, but a realistic time. So if we put that as an action, Kim, that they'll come back to us with a time for that.
Yes.
Yeah. We could possibly come back with sort of us starting to pull out some of the data that we're getting now from health and our social care colleagues, particularly around this third lockdown, because obviously what they are seeing in a meeting I went to last week, that some of the data they had after the first lockdown is different from this lockdown in how it has impacted our older residents. So certainly even if we kind of did a little bit on that for you, and so then how we can start shaping and how consultation could look.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I think that one of the problems might be that you have also to formulate or you will have a message from the executive at some stage about how the SLAs are going to be formatted. So your Aging Well strategy and action plan is going to be hugely affected by that. So the sooner you get that, I guess, the better. Because if you make all your plans and then they're scuppered because, you know, the plans aren't going to get funded, you know, the organisations aren't going to get funded. So I think you've got a tricky, and I do recognise it's going to be a very tricky time for you to be making these plans, but we have to do the best we can.
Okay, so if we can have a date as and when, Katie, that would be really, really good. Anything else before turning over the pages? The last page is the section B work programme, and then there's the section C. One point I'd make for Mark, I'm really pleased that there's a lot more detail in some of the boxes where before the update and responses, we didn't really have what the updates were until we got to the meeting. It's really useful to have that, Mark. So I presume it was you who populated that, so thank you for that. It makes it a much more usable document. Anything else from anybody before I move on? No? Okay, so thank you everybody for your contributions onto that. We'll get back to the bit that everybody's been waiting for, which was item number 8, the corporate performance report. And I think really my only request is that we keep to the pages I raised and the corporate performance that relates to this overview and scrutiny. It's very easy to stray. So that's why we're putting the page numbers down, which I gave, so we don't stray. No particular order, as Andrew's been talking for quite a bit. I'll let Kelvin start with his any comments he wants.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Q4 of the last financial year was another pretty tough one for my service. The leisure centres remained closed throughout that quarter, as did the community halls. I was extremely proud of the way that Building Control, Careline and Waverley Training Services continued to operate throughout the whole of the lockdown period and pandemic, and they should be noted, as well as the fact that things are moving smoothly now with Brightwell's Yard and things are beginning to come to a conclusion there. So it was a tough quarter. As I noted on the start of this, the leisure centres were shut. I thought it would maybe worth noting that they did open on the 12th of April in the first quarter of this financial year. And just to note from the committee, its performance has been really promising, actually. We've seen good usage of the centres, especially with regard to the swimming and swimming lessons, which are near to the capacity that we're allowing at the moment. So that's a very pleasing start to the first quarter of this year. When you get onto the KPIs, as I've mentioned, the leisure centres weren't open, so there was no data there for that or the health and well-being. Building Control was slightly behind on their plan checks. This is an internal challenge I set the team, but what we did see was a huge amount of site visits and activity during this last quarter. So I haven't been too tough on them with the 77%. And again, as I noted earlier, Careline and WTS maintained a really strong performance as they did throughout the year. We haven't had too many complaints in this quarter. And just on the financial element, it is largely favourable, Chair, but that is largely down to unexpected funding from Sport England to support the leisure centres whilst they were shut, and also a better than performance expected when they did open during the brief period last year. And the remainder of the saving that makes it favourable against the emergency budget, as my team have been extremely tight on expenditure and some projects were deferred to this year, which meant there were savings there. So I hope that gives you a good overview, Chairman. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
No, I would just make the point, echoing what you said. I think staff, across all of Waverley have done an absolutely outstanding role. And the way they've represented Waverley residents in really, really difficult times. And even looking at the performance, yes, there's a couple of reds, but absolutely they have to be red because of the circumstances we're in. So I don't think we need to be too critical or be too worried, because I'm sure performance will improve. And I always have absolute confidence in Waverley training services with Adele anyway. So I know the performances and the feedback is always exceptionally strong anyway. Questions from members on Kelvin's?
Thank you. It's not a question as such, but more just to reiterate what you said, Chairman. I think Kelvin and the officers at Waverley have done an amazing job. They really have, and they should be highly commended for their efforts during what's been a very, very difficult time. And I think that, you know, I've heard from residents, and you know, a few of them have actually said to me how pleased they are that their services have continued as best they can. And I've had one resident in particular who's had an issue and has just been delighted the way that staff at Waverley have dealt with it. So I commend you for all the efforts you've made. And just touching on leisure, I mean, leisure is one of those things which, you know, it's very difficult to get back into if you've been away from it for a while, like I have been. And I returned yesterday, having thought long and hard about freezing my membership, but decided to go back, and I'm feeling the pain of that again today. But what I would say is well done to you guys again, because so well organised, so professional, so everything about it was spot on. So, Chairman, I would just like to reiterate what you said. What a great job these people are doing, and it's great to see the leisure centres back up and running. So well done, very well done.
Thank you
very much.
Well, Kimberly will make a note, and that's across all of the board, not, you know, it's everyone who's been outstanding. Yeah. Okay, so if we haven't any further questions, I'll hand over to Andrew Smith. A brief update, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I can just pause on the first paragraph of the report and hand over to Katie in a minute. And Chairman, with your permission, could we combine this with item 11? Because it really does highlight what's been done throughout the pandemic, and then Katie can kind of blend in her comments that she might want to add to what appears in the Q4 report, which really also covers the whole year. So with your permission, we can probably combine those and streamline it, if that's all right.
That's fine, absolutely.
Good, thank you. So moving down there, just to speak about the community tension, we have seen in the fourth quarter and throughout the year an increase in the amount of antisocial behaviour and complex antisocial behaviour between neighbours, where perpetrator and victim are not always easy to define. So we've had 3 community triggers raised. Before the first one that we actually accepted that met the threshold, we'd had a number submitted that hadn't met the threshold. And there's a lot of work going on now to try to improve the way we look at ASB and resolve these issues with our housing colleagues particularly, but also with environmental health, where there's noise, etc. So that's produced quite a lot of work for the community safety team, who have done exceptionally well. There's also been an increase in the reporting of domestic abuse. So this is something very much on our agenda to look at as we go forward. As I say, the Safer Waverley Partnership meets really for the first time tomorrow as we come out of the pandemic, and it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of that meeting, the partners around the table, how they view the situation within the borough. We are very grateful for the revitalised police team under Inspector Samantha Adcock. It's great. There are new bobbies on the beach, shall we say, and so the joint action groups and the community harm risk management meetings are going well. I think they're chaired much tighter now, and so hopefully we can address some of these issues with our partners as we go forward. That blends into safeguarding. We've had 2 audits on our safeguarding policy and practices. The first one was the Surrey County Council Section 11 Children's Partnership, Safeguarding Children's Partnership Audit, which we did very well in. The one thing they pulled us up on was that we could probably do better in engaging directly with children. Well, as virtually none of our services do engage directly with children, it's quite hard to know how we could improve on that. But they particularly commended our policy, which obviously came through this committee and was approved by this committee. So that was good. We've had an internal audit where I think we will have more recommendations in terms of reporting. It's been difficult to find a foolproof and fail-safe way of reporting safeguarding referrals and concerns. We've used the eSINs system, which has been clunky and hasn't really worked for us. And so Katie and Claire Arnold, the community administrator, have been working on a new system for that. So lots of work going on in terms of antisocial behaviour, working with colleagues, and also continually improving our safeguarding, which we can never stand still on. It's like riding a bike uphill. You stop and you go backwards. So a lot of work which Katie, I'm very, very grateful to Katie as Deputy Safeguarding Lead for all the work that she does all the time on keeping our safeguarding where it should be. So as I said, I'll just hand over to Katie just to talk about the work that's been done by the communities team and by our partners during the pandemic. And there are some great statistics there, particularly on community meals, but I won't steal Katie's thunder. So if I can hand over, Chairman, to Katie Webb, I'll do that now.
Thank you.
Obviously we were hoping for the Q4 that obviously that the centres would have been open and vibrant, a bit like the leisure centres, but we got hit with that over Christmas. So in the way of services, obviously day services, they remained closed up until they could open. Well, actually, they're open again on May the 17th. And they're all opening very cautiously, but they're all really delighted to start welcoming back some of their clients, and not all of them, because some are still wary about going back into the centres, but there is other provision. I mean, just in the past year, we were doing some sums around it for the Q4 monitoring, and through that last year, we the community meals, which is our centres, had delivered, approximately 42,000, which was a brilliant number to our most vulnerable clients. And it's not just the delivery of a meal; they were having wellbeing checks when they go there through the volunteers, and a lot of the time recently they've been having like doorstep conversations and things. So they've been doing a lot more in that way with them. The helpline calls, and those are the calls that actually came from the public to Waverley. They weren't the extremely clinically vulnerable ones. They were where we were making outward calls. These were inward calls. We received over 6,000, but just under, 6,000 to this number. I have to say we have to have a really big thank you to the then housing services who picked that up with Voluntary Action South West Surrey and ran with it. They were really, really good. Jane, Claire and I picked up it after Christmas in Q4. We didn't have as many calls. We had, a lot of the information still on the website and things, so it was a lot easier. Really, for Q4, we've been working really closely with our voluntary organisations to really look at how we could have supported their clients remotely. So there was a lot of work we were doing with them around establishing online activities, doorstep conversations, quizzes. Some were delivering art packs and craft packs, and some were hosting virtual tea parties and bingo. So for those who have been able to connect digitally, that has been there for them. There is now a lot of work for the residents who aren't able to connect digitally, and sort of so that they've got that offer as well. So there's quite a lot of projects going forward about ensuring that there is a balance and that we can meet our really hard to reach. Obviously, this hasn't particularly impacted. We haven't been picking up necessarily the schools and young people, because they have also been impacted through not being able to be digitally connected. But we did have the hardship funds that were supporting those residents. So we were able to signpost, and the hardship funds were able to support that, or they were sort of working with the schools and other community groups. So that's been really good work. We certainly saw an increase in the food banks and the community stores. The community stores are beginning to wind up the operation and it going back to the food banks, which is the right thing to do at this moment, if they can do that, and then those residents be supported through the food banks again. And again, there still is the hardship fund. And obviously the work, the service level agreements workshop working group is next on the agenda, so we can kind of discuss that. It's been a really challenging year. I mean, I think what we've also seen is how residents now want to some residents are still very cautious, and that includes, you know, from age whatever to whatever. It goes across the whole age range of people wanting to connect, or people who are nervous to connect back or get back to activity. So I think, you know, there's still a lot of work for us to do to sort of work with our partners, with our social care colleagues, with our health colleagues, with our voluntary sector. There's still a very big place for the voluntary sector, and we're wanting to start harnessing that and get them more involved in some of the digital tech projects that are happening. So yeah, hopefully quarter one of this next year we'll see much more activity rather than sort of all the online things. But yeah, it's been a very interesting year. But thank you.
Okay, well, I've just got a couple of points and then I'll throw it open. First point where you said about the review about engagement with children and what does that actually mean? Well, I think we should ask that question, or I think you should ask that question, because if they then do a subsequent review at some stage, what you don't want is where it's told, well, this was identified and you haven't done anything with it. I think we just could be blunt saying, what do you mean? Would be my suggestion. Okay, sorry, Carol, Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, what we need to do is find a different way to engage, because I think what they're talking about is when young people are engaged in the care package or whenever they're sort of at the child protection side and the at-risk side, and they're involved in those decisions. We're involved with young people through other activity and through our housing and our tenants. So I think we need to just look at a different way so we can evidence how we're interacting, but it might be different. You know, it's not going to be exactly the same as, say, adult social care would, children's services would be.
No, I just think we need to clarify exactly. So what we think they mean actually is what they mean. And my second point before I throw it open is the JET team. That's probably for you, Andrew. It's gone very quiet on performance and activity of the JET team. I know we mentioned it, I think, when we had the presentation from the Safer Waverley. Can we have maybe in the next meeting just an update on what exactly are the JET team doing, what sort of work and results, just because it's gone very, very quiet on it.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll take that back to Richard Homewood, who is the person who kind of sort of coordinates the JET team. Yes, I'll take that back to him.
Okay, so we'll put that as a
under me.
Okay, thank you. I'm opening it up, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chairman. To Katie and Andrew, if I may, talking about children again and our responsibility toward them. I think just an observation of mine is that in the same way that with older people, we have always taken responsibility for social and recreational activities and care, we need to do the same with children and not go any further, because you know, I know what Surrey will do, or the health service indeed. Once you're trapped, that's it. And as Chairman has said, it's then expected of you. And we don't have a responsibility for anything other than social and recreational. And an absolutely excellent initiative took off like nobody's business at Cranley, the Friday night thing where they had, and so that could roll out across all the leisure centres and in other places as well. So, you know, really just that's just my observation from the outside looking into your very complicated responsibilities.
If that, Councillor Dixon, sorry, you had your hand up.
Yes, that's okay. No, I was listening to Councillor Ellis. Yes, just one thing, Katie. I have friends and neighbours who are in the age group that you're trying to help with your third age programs. And the one thing I've noticed that's happened during the pandemic is a lot of them have lost their confidence, they've lost some of their communication skills because they've been sat at home on their own, and they've lost a lot of their memory. So if you could, or perhaps you've already thought of this, are we facilitating the voluntary sector and all our own centres with best practice for, I don't know, trying to help them get their memory back and doing activities? It's not just, you know, opening the centre, but when they get there, we're doing activities that are appropriate for trying to get them to get back to where they were 15 months ago. The other thing I would like to mention, which my parents are suffering from a lot at the moment, is what we've seen as a digital acceleration in many forms of life, which means that if you're trying to sort out your telephone or your internet connection or your banking, a lot more of it is either on the phone or on a mobile app. Now, for most people over the age of 80, a mobile app is like landing on the moon. They have no clue. And with all the banks and things like that shut, people might, I think it might be useful doing some lightweight questionnaires, like have you got outstanding issues where you haven't been able to get through to a call centre, or you've got problems. It could be even problems with their pensions, which is really quite slow and things like that. And are we doing anything like that? Can we do anything like that?
No, you're absolutely right. And there is quite a lot beginning to happen. So in the Farnham area, the Farnham Maltings were given some funding through the Better Care Fund, which is an adult social care one, and that is about befriending and connecting and helping rebuild confidence. So that's been delivered and monitored through Farnham Maltings, but through adult social care, and we're part of that because obviously we've got some sort of with the day centres and things, centres for older people, sorry, we are trying to sort of do quite a lot of work on that. All the centres are finding exactly what you said, that their clients have lost confidence, they're nervous. Some of their clients have actually got to the point where it's been too long and can't come back, which is, you know, is very sad. And that's been an impact across the whole of the borough. I think, you know, it's something that is a priority for all agencies. And, you know, that there's lots happening, but maybe what we need to try and do is take back and sort of really find out what areas they're doing it in and focusing, and we can sort of supply a list for you. But that there is there's a new tablets that have been designed which are very much around just that basic use for people who are not as digitally aware, and it's called a tech pro. It's had some funding from the Surrey Integrated Care Partnership for Intervention and Prevention, and that is literally putting the bid in at the moment for it, and that will really help. And it's using volunteers to help also go out and get people digitally connected, and that isn't across, again, it's across all age ranges, because I think we mustn't forget our residents who've maybe got mental health or learning disabilities. You know, it's a far wider issue, but yeah, I think it's been a real impact of the pandemic, and the organisations are seeing it now as they're trying to encourage their clients to come back to activity. There's quite a bit of nervousness.
There's an astonishing number of apps that you have to have on a day-to-day basis to function at the moment, and it's just, I find it quite difficult. I don't know how other people manage.
No, agree. HK, HUK and HK Surrey are beginning to do some work around supporting even on a more basic level, going in and supporting residents about so certain forms for filling in, and they have seen a huge increase. And what they're saying is they're much more complex cases as well. They're, you know, whereas they might have been 10 minutes on the phone, they're now kind of like 2 or 3 conversations on the phone to get forms filled in. So yeah, it's an increasing problem.
Okay, any other questions from anybody? No? Okay, thank you for that, Katie. Okay, so next item I've got is number 9, review of KPIs. And then my papers on that. So
Yeah, you have.
they're not in here. This is the latest one.
So it's got, it says,
Right, so it's pages 5 to 8 of the supplementary. So it should be the last copy you have. Now, who's looking for this? Nora.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, committee. So As you might be aware, we as an organization will provide you or the scrutiny committees with our corporate performance indicator set to scrutinize. But once a year, we actually sit back and look at the indicator set and review it in light of any new legislation, organizational needs as well, and the feedback that we received from yourself, members, and the executive as well, and just look at the set and kind of still fit for what we need to apply to it, and we'll bring those proposals to you. If you have proposed those recommendations.
I think we've lost Nora somewhere.
Louise, can I
Yeah.
take over?
Yeah.
So I think what Nora was saying was once a year we take an opportunity to review all the existing PIs, and we've spoken to all the heads of service and received feedback, and the ones there in front of you for commercial services on the on page 6 of the supplement are the ones for under the remit of this committee, and you'll see that there are no proposals for new PIs or to change any of the existing ones. So it's really you know, for your consideration here, and if that looks okay.
Okay, well, before I open it up, I always think these should be challenging, but they should be achievable. And what we don't want to do is be setting targets that you're set to fail because they're too high. So looking at those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, any views from the floor on whether they're, 1, are they challenging enough, and 2, are they achievable?
I think I've got the right pages.
I was going to say, Chairman, can you confirm what page you're on?
Yeah.
Well, I'm on the supplementary report.
I haven't
So
got
it's page 5,
I haven't got page
so
5.
right at the start of it.
Where the corporate performance report,
Yes.
It's before
the
that.
beginning of the corporate performance report should have the, have you got the covering report before the corporate performance
A
report?
bit of report before. No, so
Okay, on your main agenda then,
Yes.
if you go to pages 15 to 18,
I think that's the page you got there.
Is this
I
one
can
here?
see.
Is that there?
That's it there.
yes.
We'll have a bit of time to digest those.
Yeah, I didn't understand this. Because you've got visits to the leisure centres at 448,000, and that's unchanged. That's unchanged based on when? Based on 2019? Because, or what sort of, when are we expecting these 448,000 visits to have occurred?
That's from the previous year,
Right.
because we're now into a new performance year.
So what is the target for this year then?
That will be the same target, but of course, what we don't want to do is, because of COVID, drop to a different figure, because then we've got to change all the targets again to put it back up.
Oh,
So we accept that because of COVID, some of these targets might not be met,
okay.
or in a quarter they might not be met. But then once we're out of COVID, that's what we should be striving towards. Councillor Wells.
What are critical faults?
Yeah, those are where critical faults are where the care line machinery actually breaks down, and we would commit to be fixing those within 48 hours.
Oh, like that changed down. 10%.
Expand.
10% of people can wait for how many days? 2 days for their
Yeah.
care line. That's quite, that is critical.
Okay, well, the whole point of this discussion is if we feel that as a scrutiny committee that 90% should be increased, then that would be our recommendation. So,
Well, I think they've got to have a bit of wriggle room, but I would say 95 from my point of view.
okay, people's views. I saw Councillor Dixon said yes. Councillor Forshesky.
And the higher the better. Which again, it's kind of managed the expectation and reality of it, that if we set our sights low, we need to set them as high as we can. I think 48 hours is perhaps too low.
Okay, Councillor Henry.
Yes, I'd like to see an upturn in that. I mean, with regard to the pandemic, I mean, we're past the worst stage of it now. But I mean, a few months ago, to be at these levels, two days having no recourse whatsoever would have been absolutely frightening. In today's terms, it's probably more acceptable because there are people that can actually go into their homes and help them. But we were at a stage where people couldn't go, you couldn't go and visit your neighbours. It was all on the doorstep. So yeah, I would like to see this.
I'll come to you.
There's two ways of doing this, isn't there? You either make it 24 hours, not 48, and leave it at 90, or you could do, well, all right, you could do 48 hours, but you must reach 95. There's this sort of different ways of approaching it.
I'll come to Councillor Follows, and then maybe I think Kelvin can sort of maybe answer that question, whether there's logistical reasons and that sort of stuff. But Councillor Follows, please.
I would imagine there are logistical issues to changing it to 24.
I would imagine so, but I'll wait for that.
I would just say with the previous 5 quarters were 100% for this service. I would imagine the executive would agree with you that 95% would be an acceptable stretch target, considering that we've had 100% for so long and through the pandemic. So I don't think there'd be any issue with that from the executive.
Okay, Kelvin. So I think it looks like it's going to be increased to 95%. Unless there is a reason why it can be reduced to 24, but again, I don't want to make it unrealistic because of logistical issues.
Yeah, the 24 hours would be a very logistically difficult to achieve. I'm comfortable with the 95. We aim for 100%, as you can see. It's not that we work to the target. I'd hate you to think that. And anywhere where there is an issue where we couldn't get there, hasn't been the case this year. I wouldn't want you to think that people are left alone. That would be, we would be able to inform family members or local neighbours that this was an issue and we couldn't get out. But yeah, 95% within 48 hours is achievable.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. I think you just wanted to.
I just wanted to go on to something else. I hope can I change the subject?
Shall I finish on this?
No, just about these numbers. I mean, let's talk about the apprentices.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says in C10 that we've got a target of 30 apprentices, and then it says in C8 that we only want 75% of the 30 to achieve their qualification. Well, I don't know what 25% of 30 is, but I do know that a quarter of 28 is 7. So we're talking that out of 30 apprentices, we are going to be happy that 7 drop out. Now, that is a lot. I think, one, because there's a crisis amongst young people. A lot of them don't want to go to university. We should be selecting them better and supporting them. If out of 30, I would expect at most 2 to drop out, not 7.
Okay, well, let Kelvin and maybe I'll come in afterwards, depending on what Kelvin says.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Dixon. First of all, so the 76 and 70% targets are achievement rates and timing rates. So we set targets for our apprentices when they join to achieve certain qualifications. But I think there was a comment made we should choose better, or we should focus on our cohort. We deal with a cohort of individuals that we really work hard with on study programme to achieve their targets, but schools have failed some of these people, so it's very difficult to get them to really achieve those targets. The apprenticeship targets we're talking here, which are a slightly separate cohort, are way above our sort of learning providers sort of organisations that we compare ourselves against. So those performance figures you have in front of you there, achievement of those would be seen as a very good performance, a very strong performance by a education operation like ourselves. So I would be loath to go higher. It would make it unachievable.
Because in Surrey and in Waverley, we have some of the best schools in the country, And overall, our children are very well supported. So I can't believe, I don't know, I can imagine there are other league tables we can compare ourselves against. But I think we should be aiming to be at the top performers, not, yes, because we have got such good educational standards across the board. Does not everyone else agree with me?
I think the issue is, these are the people who have dropped out of school.
Yes, but even if they dropped out of school, in this county, we do manage to achieve very good educational outcomes for all of our kids.
These are the ones that are, it's very difficult to get them into education and to keep them. The thing I found is it's very, very difficult to understand how the Waverley Training Services works and how it's different to other educational establishments. And what I did is I went there and spent quite a bit of time when it was actually under my portfolio to actually understand how difficult it is and what an achievement when they can get a youngster in and get them through and get them out with a qualification. And these are the people, unfortunately, that sometimes come from dysfunctional families, who, lots and lots of different reasons have not continued into school. So I think to increase it would make it unachievable. And I think actually what they achieve, well, I can say to everybody, if you've never been there, go and sit and talk to the staff and sit down with Adele and see what a brilliant job they do keeping those children on track. Councillor Foley,
so I haven't been, and I am going for that very reason. And one of the things we're going to be asking them to do is to do a quick presentation for all councillors so that it's clear what they do, and so that targets like this are in a bit more context for everybody, because I think otherwise on their own they're a bit in isolation. So hopefully that will help everybody, and certainly will help the executive.
And the last time it had its Ofsted report, it's gone leaps and bounds over the last 5-6 years, and it's been highlighted for the excellent work. And I think unless you go there and see it actually operate, I think it puts it into context. It's very difficult to look at a target and put that into reality. So personally, I can see the point you're raising, but I'm personally happy with the target, because I think otherwise we might make it unachievable for them.
Yeah, agree.
Well, I took over from you, so
Definitely.
You're welcome to join me, Sally, when we go.
it's well worth a few hours to do that. And anybody else who would like to do that, I'm sure we can arrange that.
And Chairman, one point of just clarity, C10 is 30, that is the study programme learners. Apprenticeships, we have over 170 apprentices at any one time. So it was you were comparing 30 with the 71%, that's not comparable.
Excellent. Any other views on that before I wrap that item up? So, Louise, because I think we probably lost Nora. So the general consensus was that C7 to be increased to 95%, and we'll monitor that because we don't want to be the kiss of death having put it up. We find we have issues, but other than that, we endorse the other items to remain as they are.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, so we can move on to item number 10, which is Service Level Agreement Working Group, which should be pages 19 to 32. Councillor Ernst, I think you're going to lead on this, are you?
Yes, have to. Can't find the papers, but I know they're there because I've read them. Page 19.
Chairman, can I just raise a point that I'm very, I don't understand, or I've missed it, or if you could help me out. I'm just looking at, we've got on the agenda a couple of recommendations there with regards to the corporate performance. Would we be agreeing those?
Right, I'm confused. We've got so many different papers trying to get the correct version.
So it's, again, it's on the updated one. I'm just mindful that we don't miss the opportunity.
Right, so if I've got the same one, consider the performance set out in Annex 1, makes recommendations to senior management executive program. I think we've done that. So that was agreed. And consider the annual review of performance indicators, makes any comments and recommendations to the executive, which I think we've done that as well. So that's been agreed.
I think, thank you, Chairman, for saying that. I just think for anybody watching, when it comes to recommendations, you know.
It's a good point, because we're working through loads of
Yeah,
papers.
that's right. And we know that we're making the recommendation, but.
No, that's.
Yeah.
Chairman, just while we're there then, the new customer services, is that us? The new customer services set up under David Allen's? Not us.
Chairman, that's value for money.
Value for money.
Oh, yeah, okay. Good. So,
Over to you.
So, yes, it's been a rocky road for us, and we've had lots of twists and turns and sharp hairpin bends, but we have negotiated them with the very efficient help of Mark and Katie, and I mustn't leave Andrew out. Because what happened was we started this the year before last, 2019, November, and we had to stop. Everything had to go on hold. So we didn't achieve everything that we actually had scoped for. And I was anxious that we didn't lose that ability to forensically scrutinise the SLA situation. And when we came back in, I think, February, we learned that the executive were going to form a working group to look at the very same thing, which we've been formed to do in 2019. So that kind of put us on a bit of hold. In order that we continue to keep it on the work programme, we had to devise a slightly different way of doing it, which Chairman agreed with, and it's in the report here what we're going to do. So basically, we're doing a sort of a sandwich. We're doing a pre-executive decision scrutiny, whereby we've laid down a few things that we think the executive need to consider within their corporate priorities, to keep the whole thing within the corporate priorities. Then hopefully the executive will come back with their decision in a timely way, because we don't have a lot of time before people have to start applying again, and they also want to be getting on with their business plans. And of course, they can't if they don't know exactly what they're going to receive from Waverley, whereas they've been quite sure about that for the last 3 years. Suddenly, that's what taken away from them. So what we thought we would do, and we indeed have done, is have a sandwich scrutiny effect. So we're pre-decision scrutinised by setting out what we feel the executive should be considering, and then when the executive come back with their thoughts and decisions, we then scrutinise that. But it's got to be done very quickly and in a very timely way. We've really got to get on with it. And so as soon as the executive come up with their decision, we need to convene very, very quickly the working group and scrutinise what they've decided. Is that clear? As much. As much. Well, just think of it. You know. And it's a slight. We haven't. Well, I haven't worked quite like that before, but I mean it's fine, because it's just absolutely fine to scrutinise pre-decision as well as it is to scrutinise post-decision. So that's what we're going to do.
Okay, I don't know if Katie or Mark want to come in.
No, obviously not.
I was waiting to see if Mark offered first, but he hasn't, has he? But Mark, do please correct me if I get any of this wrong. I think one of the things we with the working group, sort of where we changed tact is we funded the same 12 organisations now for a number of years. So some are on their third service level agreement, which is sort of nine years worth of funding. And what we haven't done for quite a long time is look at, do these organisations currently sit in our new corporate priorities? Are they still meeting the needs of the new emerging priorities that we're having, sort of coming out of the pandemic, but B, how health has changed, how our residents, have changed over sort of 9-10 years, but what is the real need for them? And so we sort of looked at maybe some emerging priorities and some themes with the working group, and actually areas that maybe if we were to relook at changing the service level agreement funding or opening it up wider, what sort of priorities and key themes we would be looking at, and how would that look? So we had a kind of quite a long discussion about that, and I think Mark and I have to say Jane Todd have captured it really well in the report. I'd like to say I wrote it, but I sort of topped and tailed it like Andrew. But yeah, so I think it's just sort of thinking that, and then working with the executive group to, if we have funding, because that is the key, if we have funding for the voluntary sector, how actually that funding could look like going forward. Would it be a mixture of service level agreements? Would it be some tender, some commissioning? It's just really opening that debate up to sort of for us to maybe think of the funding of our voluntary sector to differently. And also, do we need to widen the age span? Because as you'll see, large majority of our funds go to older people's services. I'll be quiet now, Andrew, you can go.
You have it.
Well, if I may, Chair, yeah, really was just to support what Councillor Else was saying. I mean, it was a very interesting working group because it was formed in one universe and then reformed in another universe. And so sort of Star Trek, sort of Captain Kirk flying through various universes to get where we are. But I mean, I've been to all the working group meetings pre and post pandemic, and the dynamic commitment of that working group to look at how we should fund or commission or procure organisations to deliver services that we clearly as a council don't. We work through our partners, we work through the voluntary sector, which is good, and also looking at that broader scope of what the need is, particularly coming out of the pandemic. So it's been a unique working group. I think that Councillor Else made that point very well, and now we all work together to see, well, I mean, we trust there will be a budget of sorts. Candidly, councillors, my view is that we, even with a reduced budget and a different mechanism of procurement, commissioning services more tightly, more smartly, we may get more bang for our buck. So these are the kinds of discussions that we're going to be having with our executive and also then with overview and scrutiny members to see where we go during this year. One thing I would say, and I'm very grateful to the executive and council for allowing the extension of the SLAs for a year, because they were all due to expire on 31st of March this year with nothing in place to give our organisations any more funding. But we were able to get that extended for a year while we do this extremely important piece of work. But it is true, it was a very unique working group with two completely different modes, but the commitment and passion of the members in that group certainly lifted Katie and I. So I just really wanted to comment on that.
Okay, thank you for Andrew. Now, bearing in mind, we normally have to give 6 months' notice. I know it had nothing to do with who gets what money, but we normally give them 6 months' notice. So winding the clock back, that means by September, that is the critical date to either inform them they're not getting any money or the process. With that in mind, do we have any timescales for the next stage? Bear in mind, we've now only got a few months, really.
We've already been through this, just to say, the executive have already been through this report. So we're ahead of the game in terms of our part of this. So,
okay, so any indications on?
Well, there's a few bits of it we disagreed with and a few bits we agreed with. Particularly the one I wanted to highlight was the ring fencing of funding doesn't, I think, necessarily aid the obligations that are also on some of the SLA partners, particularly Hopper, was where there was concern. So there were a few questions about that. I think also about how we fund them and the mechanisms to do that. But all I'm saying in the first instance is that we have been through this report. So we're ahead of ourselves on that. I will obviously be going on to the next bit, which is a more formal set of recommendations from the executive working group on the subject.
Trying to push you a little bit here.
We understand the threshold of September, so I'm looking to Katie, who can't see me, but I can see her. My understanding is that that's going to have to happen in probably June, kicking off.
So we've just held all the annual service level agreement meetings, and we always use that as an opportunity to update them on the situation and where we are. So they're all very aware that a report has gone to committee tonight. We have let them have the link so that they've been able to read it. And we obviously have talked through to them that arrangements could be different next year. We don't know how those will look. And we do always talk about with them the budget implications. You know, we do it every 6 months regardless, because it's one of the things within the service level agreement is there's always been the caveat that it has to go through the budget setting process. So we do try and always keep to that 6 months, that we keep them constantly updated. Last year, we wrote letters and things to them. I think coming from this meeting today, we would want to sort of set something up with the executive to really sort of talk through what their thoughts are and really how to sort of start moving this forward. Does that help? That we have been communicating to the organisations all the time, so they are aware, so nothing would come as a surprise.
It would just be good if maybe Katie, you can just let us know the dates. So we're just cited on the dates, then we'll wait for the executive's views.
At the end of June, first week July 12th.
Okay. So we'll put that in writing, so we'll hold you to that.
Recommendation.
So now I haven't got the recommendation in front of me. Can someone?
Chairman, can I just say I completely agree with what Andrew said there, and it is thanks to this administration for that extension to the SLAs at a critical time, and it allowed a lot of people to not worry as much as they could have done had it have been cut from the start. But I also want to say that at this difficult time financially, that it's really, really important, and I think this is one of the things the working group highlighted was, you know, that need to scrutinise and to look at and to make sure that we are giving the money to those who need it on the basis that they are doing what they need to be doing out there in the community. The days have gone where we just give grants out and it's just something that happens. You know, we are a service provider, we're spending taxpayers' money. We need to be able to be seen to be validating what they're doing and making sure and having some accountability. So I think Katie's done some excellent work with some of the organisations along with other officers to you know, extract from them what they actually do. So it provides the evidence we need for them to have those extensions to the funding if it's required. So and again, we've got to make sure in this day and age that it's fit for purpose and we are accountable to our residents and the voluntary organisation. So I think it was a critical piece of work. It was very well executed, and I think we're at a point now where some very relevant points have been made. And forgive me, but I'm harping on about these recommendations a little bit because I think they are there to be added to. They are there so it can go to the executive to see that we are making recommendations. So if there's any mileage in this report to actually add a recommendation to strengthen what the chairman of the group is saying and chairman what you're saying, then I suggest that is the place that we strengthen that.
Absolutely, because from my own past experience, when we've looked at the financial standing of some of the people who receive money, they got huge amounts of money in their bank account.
Yeah.
And it's the ones that haven't got money who are the ones who've done all the work in COVID, you know, gone that extra mile. So I think it's an excellent piece of work.
Which, by the way, is why we're against ring fencing. Yeah, one of the reasons.
Well, what I'll do, because obviously the recommendations for this committee and their recommendations. So we've got 5 recommendations in the main report. And then we've got one recommendation in the covering report. So if we go to the covering report, which is a nice, easy one recommendation, everybody's got that in front of them. That's just to agree the interim report included as Annex 1 and recommended it to the executive. Is everybody happy to support that?
Yes, agreed.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll go into the 5 recommendations, which are page 31. Now, do people want me to go for each one individually or just take that people are happy to support them?
And sorry, since we've got Paul here, perhaps can you just elaborate on why the executive was against ring fencing, well, Hopper in particular, because Hopper takes up quite a lot of the money.
In principle, the idea of ring fencing was opposed by most of the executive. Sorry, my apologies, Chair. Is happy for me to respond to that.
Yes.
The main reason we're against ring fencing is because actually the SLA process is two-way. It's rights and obligations, and actually by ring fencing it, you effectively cut off the need for these organisations to be sort of on the hook for meeting some of their obligations. And as the chair mentioned, some of these organisations either have a lot of money in their bank accounts for various different reasons and lots of other circumstances around it that mean we do need to be, I think, a bit more realistic and flexible about how we do some of this. And ring fencing just basically makes it like a grant, because they don't have to do things in order to justify getting the money. And I think Councillor Forashevsky's point about it needs to be transparent and accountable and making sure that we're getting value for money out of taxpayers' money. So ring fencing kind of detracts from that whole process by guaranteeing certain organisations money for reasons that really aren't justifiable, in the opinion of many of the executive.
Okay, well, these would be recommendations,
absolutely,
not decisions.
No, of course not.
So are people happy to, I mean, we can either do number 1, 2, 4 and 5 and then independently do the number 3, or do people, are this group happy to take the 5 on block?
Yes, well, I am, but could I just say that in regard to that ring fencing, surely there's an element of procurement going on here. There's an element of procurement going on, even if the money is ring fenced. Is that right, Andrew, Katie? I mean, there's an element of procurement going on. We say what we want and what we expect and what standard we expect them to come up with. We don't just give them the money unless they come up with the goods, but they can be guaranteed the money if they come up with the goods, which operates very much like a service level agreement, but it's not quite the same. I mean, we wouldn't just ring fence the money and give it to them and it doesn't matter what they do.
No, I think Councillor Else is right, but I think the issue is that all of the organisations are slightly different and the SLAs tend to be a tad woolly. So with some, it looks like more of a procurement exercise. Some looks just more like we give them a simple grant or we give them a rent-free building. This is another reason why we certainly do want to look at this and start with a plain sheet of paper. So I think it varies from SLA to SLA.
I would, if I may, Jim, I would just sort of really encourage the executive to look very, very carefully at why they wouldn't support ring fencing for certain fairly essential organisations. And if they do, make sure they've got some really solid reasons for not ring fencing that. Because, for example, I think we've decided Hopper, I mean, transport in this rural borough is so essential that we need really to protect that service for our residents. And the only way we can do that is, I would have thought, by ring fencing with an element of procurement, so that they know what they've got to come up with and what level of service we expect of them.
I think this is one that, you know, I'm sure people will have contrary views, but I think at the end of the day, as a overview and scrutiny, we have to either recommend or not the recommendations. What I don't want to do is get in a huge debate on, because this is not the place. Our role is, there are 5 recommendations. Do we, as an overview and scrutiny, want to recommend that? Then the executive know that's our recommendation. And with the greatest respect to the executive, if they decide not to agree with our recommendations, then they will have, you know, to have their reasons for doing that. So although I don't want to cut the conversation down, but I think we've got to get back to what we want to do, and that's, are we happy to do these recommendations? That's for Jessica.
Chairman, I'll be brief and thank you. I would say we take them on block because, as I say, we are scrutiny, then the executive will make their decision and then we can look at it again. But I think the point 3, I don't like the word ring fencing. I think that it's an old-fashioned term. I think there's a better way of describing how we fund or procure, you know, services. I think ring fencing has that underlying meaning to it, but it demonstrates beautifully why there's a need to look at and revise and look at exactly how we're funding these organisations. This is the time to be doing it. I think Andrew's point was well made. But I would just say let's on block 5 recommendations agree.
Is everyone happy to do?
Yes.
Do it on block?
Agreed.
Okay, so there's 5 recommendations. I won't read them out, but they're on page 31. Is everybody happy to take them on block to recommend to the executive those 5 recommendations?
Yeah.
I'm very happy to agree with them, Chairman, but I just would stress the point as well. Remember, you can add to your recommendations if you feel there's something the executive should. I'll just make that point clear because you don't have to accept the recommendations. There's just 5.
And if there's additional recommendations, please shout, because it is our recommendation. So at the moment we've got those 5 plus the one in the interim report. Are there any additional recommendations as raised that people would like to? Mark, apologies. Please add any comments.
It's actually sort of independent of the recommendations. So maybe if I come in after you've agreed what the recommendations will be.
I think we've agreed those recommendations. So unless you come out with anything startling, we haven't got any proposed recommendations.
Okay. I was just going to observe that there's mention that we would need to inform the organisations in September. The next meeting of this committee is the 15th of September. The executive meeting for that month appears to be before that. Therefore, if that's the kind of time frame, it doesn't look like we can meet that. We could kind of meet that on the present, on that kind of time frame. Do you want to consider either delegating authority so the task and finish can report directly to the executive?
Mark, I think what we would need to do, because I think it's a topic that, you know, though we have a working group, I think this committee would want to be involved in that process. We will have to call a special meeting to deal with that, and obviously we'll be guided by you for the timescales. But for a one item issue, I think that's important enough that we should put our views and our recommendations and our thoughts to the executive. So we'll just call a special meeting this item, and then we haven't got a problem with when is the next meeting, because we'll just call it as soon as we can.
Sure.
Okay, anybody got any other comments on that before? Oh, hey, I can see your hand. Hello, Katie. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, I'm glad I've said that to somebody. Always one. It's always one.
I just wanted to add some clarity around this sort of 6 months. The 6 months originated when we were signed up to the Surrey Compact, where there was a compact between ourselves and Surrey and our health organisations that we would always give 6 months notice of any changes to funding. Although obviously we want to keep really focused and give as much warning as possible, we're no longer signed up to the Surrey Compact. We kind of do it as a bit of a best practice. So if there is a little bit of slippage, you know, that we're not kind of breaking any things that we're signed up to. We just try and do it out of principle as well, is give them as much notice as possible, and 6 months is a good amount. But we're no longer tied into the Surrey Compact. That was why we had the 6 months particularly.
Thank you. I think morally we would want to give 6 months because you've got businesses that may have staffing issues. It may be we are not tied into doing that, but I think as a council, it's the right thing to do. So if there was going to be a further recommendation, it would be that we give a 6-month notice, despite the fact that we're not legally obliged to, but morally that we would recommend that a minimum of 6 months. Because I think they've got to plan with staffing and recruitment or loads and loads of stuff. So Mark, if that is an additional recommendation, it's that we adhere to the 6 months, and is everybody happy to sign up to that additional recommendation?
Totally.
And yeah, sometimes we're not the masters of our own destiny, and things can happen and things can change. But I think if that is what we try and set it, our flag out on, we will try to do that. Okay, anything else on that? I'm sure Councillor Foz is absolutely delighted with all those recommendations. Most of them. Brilliant. Okay. So we've done 10, we've done 11. We're now on number 12, which is Kelvin.
Number 11?
Number 11 we've done. Yep. So 12 is the Cranley Leisure Centre.
Thank you, Chairman. This will be a sort of a brief verbal update. So what is happening with the Cranley Leisure Centre? We are, myself and the team will be taking a report to executive next month to gain approval to begin the feasibility study for the new Cranley Leisure Centre. So we will be seeking consultant support to help us through that process, and that will be the authority will be seeking in June. It's important that we move fairly swiftly on this element because the new Cranley Leisure Centre will form. We need to have a decision on the new Cranley Leisure Centre to inform the leisure management contract retender process, which will begin later this year because our contract runs out in June 2023. And basically the 2022 is a year programme in essence to go out to tender, test the market and appoint people in the right requisite time. So we will be looking to get consultant support appointed during June and July. We've committed to coming back to this committee back in September to update further on Cranley, and we'll have a much better idea there. But we really need a clear decision by the end of this year to inform the larger leisure management contract retender. So that's sort of a brief update of the timelines that we'll be looking at, Chair. And in the notes, it says about a working group going forward. I would like to propose that working group works alongside myself and the portfolio holder on the wider leisure management contract retender, as well as the Cranley Leisure Centre feasibility will form part of that work. So that would be my proposal, Chair, if that's okay.
Okay, and clearly the whole way through, the Cranley councillors will be kept fully up to speed, even if they're not on part of the working group, out of
absolutely, absolutely, Chairman.
And it's good that we've got some dates that we've seen a bit of progress. It's been, we've hit a couple of hurdles, we've had to stop and full starts and everything. But I think having a date for the consultancy and, like you say, because of the procurement, again, you're going to be fairly tight on your times with your legal time to do everything. So I think that's good news. It's progress. And if you can just keep us updated, even if it's a verbal update, just so we're always up to speed.
Absolutely, Chairman.
Brilliant. Questions for Kelvin from the floor?
Yeah.
I'll go to the first one. I saw Councillor Foz.
And again, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Calvin, for your report. And yes, I'm delighted to see the work progressing nicely. I think, as we all understand, there's two processes going here parallel, and that's one the tender and one the actual future of the leisure centre. But although I haven't declared an interest in being a member of the leisure centre, and maybe I should have done, I'm a massive fan because I think of what they provide for the local community. So I've got one or two concerns with regards to funding, but I'll probably take them offline. And it goes to, it's regarding 106s that were expected to come from certain sources that we know now may well not, which jeopardises some of the financial position, but that's not for here nor now. So I'll take that offline with somebody else.
It's not for
personal,
there.
just for my own personal peace of mind. But yeah, there's two things going on parallel. Great to have a date, great to have progress. I'm really, really, really looking forward to a leisure centre that's fit for purpose and can carry on doing the great work that it's doing already, but just modernised. So thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask Kelvin, so have you gone back to square one, or has the work that was done previously been carried on?
The work that's been done previously will inform the further work sort of post-COVID in the new environment, just to ensure, you know, the financials that Councillor Foroszewski's just mentioned, that we really look at it and just ensure that what we propose going forward is fit for the future and serves Cranley as we all want it to. So yes, it will form a major part of that work. So will we use that, Councillor Else? Yes.
So quite a lot of money was spent, wasn't it?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it wouldn't be nice to think that that was going to be wasted. We got S. Who have you still got the same?
It was the consultants we used previously were SLC.
Yes.
Because of the amount of because we'll probably use the same consultant to do the feasibility study and the leisure management contract retender. We will need to go out to a full tender during June. So it could be SLC, but we will have to test the market.
Any other questions from anybody on that? No, thank you, Kelvin, for that update. Right, moving on swiftly, item 30, exclusions.
Sorry,
I've got Mark saying yes, Mark,
Yep.
please.
It does mention in the agenda text potentially obtaining provisional members. Is that something the committee would be interested in doing at this stage, or leaving till later?
Are you talking about the working group that Kelvin previously mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think we know that the Cranley councillors definitely will need to be involved, or certainly updated. I think Kelvin would probably be better to get other members from outside this committee and outside of the Cranley, because this is a facility for Waverley as a whole. We can nominate people now. I'm not so sure until we know where we're going with this, that we can put something out then, would be my view, unless people want to volunteer now. Now, I think we'll wait, Mark, until we've got something back from the consultants and Kelvin updates us and we know what does that mean? What does that mean for time commitment? What's expected of our members? So what's the terms of reference we need to look at first? And those type of things, I think, first.
Okay.
So just keep it in your back of your mind, though, Mark, so we don't lose that for the next meeting. Okay, so item 13 is exclusion of press and public. We haven't got any reason to do that. Anything from anybody around the table before I close the meeting? Or anybody watching? No? Well, can I thank everybody, especially those who attended, and for our great support as we always get from Democratic Services and the management, so thank you. Meeting's closed and we're early for a change.
Thank you very much.